Hello and welcome to the next episode of Two Girls Talk Transits. Today we're correcting ourselves because we got Mercury retrograded.
No, we
So,
didn't.
so we missed a lot of astrology from December 6th through December 7th. So we are gonna do that today. And I'm your host, Maddie.
And I'm Kaleigh.
So basically, we recorded this initial week. We recorded it on November 22nd. And Mercury was at 21 degrees of Sagittarius, direct, but about to station retrograde. And this podcast was released that following Friday, November 29th, when Mercury had retrograde back to 21 degrees Sagittarius. So a very literal, um, very exactitude Mercury moment. And this is what I mean. When that podcast was released, I didn't know that I was missing like 3 days of really important astrology. And I had no idea that I was missing it until very recently when I was like, oh, we're missing a couple of important nodes, mostly Mars retrograde. And this is a good example of how Mercury retrograde works and how it works to you personally, because I have a personal point. My midheaven degree is at 21 degrees of Aries. So Mercury was also making a trine to my midheaven, which is my work, which is this podcast. And I had missed a major message to get across.
Yeah, and for me, I never even knew we were missing it in general. Maddie was the one that notified me, but I don't think I would have caught on. But Mercury retrograde is in my eighth house, so it was like unknown and maybe shall never be known. I don't know.
Well, that's a great eighth house example, like the eighth house of other people's resources. Yeah, it was like my mistake and my caught up. So we need to talk about Mars retrograde. So that's happening this Friday on December 6th. And Mars is stationing retrograde in Leo at about 6 degrees of Leo. It's going to be retrograde all the way through January.
I was honestly looking at it like 2 days ago. I think it was February that it moved
It
direct.
was February, right?
Yeah, I can check really
I
quick.
know, I'm like right here. Here, I got it. It will go direct February 23rd. So you're right, the end of February. So a lot of Mars retrograde. And it will go all the way back to 17 degrees of Cancer. So it's like a two-parter retrograde where we're going to have these two pieces in Leo and Cancer.
Mhm.
I think Mars retrogrades are one of the most destructive retrogrades because Mars is our action and our drive and our how we show up and how we like present and do things, right? Like we do things through Mars actions. And when Mars goes retrograde, we generally take actions and then have to like clean up a mess or like redo something or like, and now the work is a lot harder because you probably cut something out or you really made a big change. I just feel like Mars retrogrades tends to be a lot of the like rash decisions sometimes, and maybe more so in Leo than Cancer.
Mhm.
How do you feel about it?
Yeah. I mean, I agree with what you said. Like, while we're in the midst of like a Mars retrograde, we could definitely do some things that like need restructuring like later. But I also think it's like a revisitation of past actions too. And, we already had Mars is in Leo right now. It hasn't quite moved retrograde yet. And then in early September, we had Mars moving into Cancer. And we spent like the beginning of the fall with Mars and Cancer. Um, and we will be like revisiting a lot of those actions that we took during that period of time. So, yeah, not only is it like a cleanup of current actions, but it's a revisitation of past actions. I guess this is like what I think.
Yeah, it is. And then it's like kind of reflecting on the choices you made and if you still desire those choices. I just think I don't know. I would just be more hesitant with some of the actions, at least that you do take in the Mars Leo portion, which is going to be all of December. And then it moves into Cancer in January. Because we also have Pluto right at those 0, 1 degrees of Aquarius. It's still in a really tight opposition with Mars right now, like 5 degrees away. You
Mhm.
want to give outer planets like a 10-degree orb. So like they're still in opposition. And I was listening to like Chris Brennan's podcast reflecting on the Mars Pluto opposition and just how a lot of like highly destructive, gross tech, like really dark things can come from that. And like maybe for yourself, you're just feeling this sudden, really intense desire to cut something away. And I just feel like with Pluto in the mix, Pluto makes it so permanent or like
Mhm.
powerful or like it
Mhm.
has if you choose to cut this out, if you choose to like leave this job or do this, you have to be certain that you're done because Pluto makes it so final. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah, it makes total sense. Yeah, I think that that's like kind of the some of the fear that gets evoked from that Pluto is that it's very final and very like intense. Um, but yeah, that is very interesting that we will kind of be revisiting that opposition.
Yeah, and I just think like Pluto is so destructive and Mars is a naturally destructive planet in a good way. Like we all need to destroy things, but Pluto is on this like grander scale. Like, if you do make that cut, you will probably burn bridges. You will probably lose things. So you just have to be so certain that this is what you desire long term and not in this heated moment in that Mars retrograde where you're like, I can't do this anymore. And two, if it goes the other way, if you're wanting to take action, like it's like this all or nothing feeling with this Mars retrograde, where I mean, I just feel like with even the news stories we've been seeing lately, like things are just so all of a sudden so heightened, like so important. And I'm mostly saying this for myself as a strong Mars placement and
Yeah.
a Mars rule midheaven and all of that is for myself, Maddie, be more cautious, more careful about decisions that you make, knowing the long-lasting implications will come from them.
Yeah, that's an important point that you made there though, because like for people watching, you can kind of understand the story of Mars a little bit more by not only looking to like the house that it's transiting, like looking to Leo, but you can also look at like what does Mars rule in your chart. Um, so that will just like paint the picture a little bit more because when Mars moves retrograde, we're having some kind of review of that Mars ruled area of our chart in some way. Yeah, so I don't know. I'm also quite interested when you were talking, I was thinking like Mars will be retrograding and we'll have the opposition with Pluto, and then it'll like go to past a point into like Cancer, and then it will come back around to make an opposition again when it moves direct. So this is like the midpoint of that Mars Pluto opposition that we're going to be experiencing.
Yeah, you will literally have Mars come all the way back around, I think like in April to Leo again. So it's like, this Mars retrograde is just like such a longer term theme that you have playing out until the spring when
Mhm.
it like finally completes this. So it's just like you just have to decide like if you are making a decision, if you are doing something right away, like can you live with that decision for 4 or 5 more months?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah.
and yeah, this just is longer term story. Or if you are uncertain about that decision, can you stay where you are for 4 or 5 more months and maybe you'll have more clarity at the end of it?
That's true. That's true. You could have more clarity, or it could be like one of those things that it's like kind of pushing your buttons, like it continues to push your buttons.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And that's a message too,
mhm. Yeah,
right?
interesting. Well, we got this, like I mean, we have this theme for like a long time for the next couple of months. We're gonna be kind of understanding more of this Mars retrograde story, but yeah, this is like the very beginning of it.
Yeah. And, with Mars stationing this week, Mars is, more heightened as all planets are when they're stationing.
Mhm.
So we are seeing a lot of martial stories in the news and conflicts and aggressions and power. A lot of powerful figures, owning their power and aggression. Like, So you're gonna just pay attention to that, I think, on that even just worldwide level, not just on that personal level too.
That's a good point. I feel like Mars retrograde in Leo, like for the couple degrees that it's going to be in there, could definitely come with like some ego battles.
So many, yes. Yeah, and then like those battles of the egos have a direct impact to society because of the Pluto and Aquarius. So
Yeah, I mean, not only will we be seeing that like outwardly, like astrology is so cool because it has like both internal and external reflection points, but like the internally we might too be feeling like there's something I want to like bring into the world or birth into the world. But we might actually, come to terms with the fact more that this is like driven by egoic needs or something like that, and it might not actually be what we truly want, but more so like the image that we would achieve from said thing.
right. Yeah, that's such a good point. It is a lot about like our own expression of authenticity with Mars and Leo. Um, and how the ego actions we take to fulfill that in different ways. So, sorry, are you okay?
Yes.
Okay. So next up though, on the same day too, like this Friday is just an intense, this weekend is so intense. And I wish I just saw this earlier before I like ended that last podcast. I'm like, oh, workout. No, I'm like, no, it's not gonna work out. But Mercury's retrograde is going to square Saturn as well on the same day on that Friday. And so this is that second square to Saturn that we were talking about, kind of reflecting back to it was like November. And that's, bad news, challenging news, or having really tough conversations or revisiting those tough conversations or restrictions and limitations. Like Mars is going retrograde and you're probably feeling frustrated about something, and then Mercury is squaring Saturn and you're just like real expressing that anger. I could see that.
Yeah, I could definitely see that. I don't know. I'm kind of interested to see what it brings. Like, I think for me personally, like, the square or like Mercury retrograde has been a lot about like money themes for me because it's in my
Mhm.
8th house. So like squaring Saturn, I feel like could be like a revisitation of like some of those like documents or personal things. There's some kind of like logistical things that's probably going to come up with this. Do you
Yeah. Go
you
ahead, sorry.
have a woodpecker that's like knocking on my window?
Oh, I can't hear it. Um, Eh, So, I mean, in two, like with the new moon squaring Saturn, this may also be a point of reflection to that. We've had a lot of the Saturn aspects this week in general. The Sun square Saturn was on the 4th of Wednesday, and now Mercury squaring Saturn on Friday. So there's a lot going back to that new moon of just all the ways that you were feeling limited or restricted
Yeah.
mentally, logically, or like with your creative thoughts and problem solving.
Yeah, that's a really good point. How long will Mercury be retrograde? Do we know?
Yeah, it will move direct on the full moon in Gemini on the 15th. So not much longer.
Okay. So
Yeah.
we got like a week and a half left of that.
Yeah. And then it will be Sagittarius January 3rd or 6th or something like that. So
Praise the Lord.
I know, so I don't like Mercury and Sag anymore. I'm done.
Yeah, it's really rough. I was like reading a whole book about Jupiter and like the negative implications of Jupiter and or like the dark side of Jupiter and how it can be like so preachy and so like just like unchangeable, I think. Like it can be so
Mm-hmm.
righteous. And I was like, oh my gosh, this like totally paints the picture of like Mercury and Sag right now. It's just like
Yeah.
can't change its mind. You know what I mean?
It's so set on these beliefs and dogmatic, and yeah, just like Saturn's like, no, that's not working. And Mercury's like, well, I'm gonna make it work. And Saturn's like, no, it's not working. But it's like they're not gonna give up.
Yeah, and the thing that's funny about Jupiter energy is that it's so enthusiastic, like it really wants to expand and it doesn't care about the logistics. So of course it'll come into an aspect with Saturn at some point that'll be like, no, you cannot. thou shalt not pass, even though thou thinks thou can.
Yeah, it is. And I mean, there is this bigger themes of Saturn themes anyway. Um, just with that new moon just playing out, but then also on Saturday on the 7th, Venus she's still in a Saturn ruled sign, but stays in a Saturn ruled sign, but she moves to Aquarius and then like promptly conjuncts Pluto in Aquarius. And then there's our little taste of a Mars Pluto opposition. Now Venus is caught in the freaking middle of it though.
Very interesting.
And I was saying earlier, in the last, this week's earlier podcast, that Venus was kind of a reprieve and like she was helpful in Capricorn. But now, as soon as she crosses that boundary, she loses all her help. She's now dealing with this battle with Mars, and then Pluto's right behind her, like intensifying. She's just like caught in crossfire.
Yeah, that's a rough position. Like, whoosh. I don't know. I
And
think, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, what it could manifest as. So you know what that Mars Pluto kind of already is for you. You know, like you're looking to your Mars ruled houses and you're looking at Leo and Aquarius. So look now to your Venus ruled houses. And those places are now going to get caught in that Mars Pluto crossfire too.
Yeah, that's a really good point to make. Yeah, there's some kind of um relationship between the Venus ruled houses now that's tying into this like broader story that we could have here. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think like even on like if we were really like to dissect it and just make it about the planets, we could be having some challenges like in our friend groups, like with our friendships, with our larger community. There's some kind of like disagreements happening, maybe with like um groups of people. So that would be like a really broad delineation, I think.
Well, yeah, like one example could be like those Mars and Leo being your ego. So like maybe you decide to take some sort of big intense action because you really want this. You've been really fighting, and it's like that Pluto thing where you just feel like so intensely, I need to make this change. But then this change inadvertently or unintentionally affects some relationship you have or some other kind of connection or something you value that you didn't realize, like, oh shit, that's also going to get impacted. Like, I didn't know that that was going to challenge that stability too. And so you have to like kind of navigate the both and there. Like, do you really want this? Are you aware of the consequences? And if you're not aware of the consequences, can you help clean up? Like, I feel like relationships are going to get really intense due to decisions you may make or don't make
Mm-hmm.
with that aspect.
You could really see that too. Yeah, I'm really interested to see how this plays out. I mean, I know Aquarius is very like humanitarian, very like righteous, and um I think it might be like disagreements based off of like what is right and just. And it's a little bit different from Libra though, so it's like more.
It's colder, it's more detached. Like
Yeah.
it cares less about the likability, but more for like the betterment of everyone, you
Mm.
know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Libra will do things because people like her.
That's very true. That is so true.
I can say that because I'm a Libra, don't worry. Um, but yeah, I mean, it is like Venus is trying to keep peace in Aquarius, or she's trying to keep it stable and steady, and Mars is over here, like, set it all on fire.
I'm almost wondering if there might be some kind of like, you might feel a little bit like ostracized by your actions, or like you're kind of like breaking the mold or breaking out in some way. And you're just that feeling is just going to be like intensified. Like what you do leads you to feeling like extremely different.
Mm, that's a
Yeah.
good one.
Hmm.
Yeah. Like isolated from your previous values.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like who are you trying to be reborn to now? You know?
Hmm. Yeah. It's
E-
definitely very interesting.
Venus is in a really tough spot like this weekend, but she will get in a much better place next week. So this is something that's kind of will pass. The Mars thing is going to be a more long-term story, but this Venus part may be more of a day or two kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
that's
then, yeah, then we also have like balancing that day on Saturday. The sun in Sagittarius is opposite Jupiter in Gemini, which is good.
I feel like we've talked about this like 5 times.
I know, right? It's not, we haven't done the sun. We've done Mercury opposite Jupiter a lot, but we haven't actually had the sun this year. Don't worry.
I'm like, why am I talking about opposite to Jupiter and Gemini so many times? Yeah.
Yeah, it's because of Mercury doing 3 oppositions to it. And yeah, that's
Mhm.
what made me realize my Mercury retrograde mistake was when it was opposite Jupiter yesterday.
It's like, how many times do I need to notify you?
For real. I mean, the sun opposite Jupiter, I do like the sun in Sag. I do, but I've been just feeling spicy about Jupiter and Gemini and just all of the Sag and Gemini energy. I'm like getting really tired of it. So, but this
Yeah.
may be a moment of like just hopefulness, optimism, and like feeling more like, but trust me. Like the Venus is like, I don't know if this is right. I feel like we're making a mistake. And you're like, no, not God, just trust me.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, we could have like some like opposing viewpoints at this point. Like maybe our like awareness is like still seeing the bright side in a way.
Yeah. Or like, yeah, it's like, I can still solve this. I can make this better. Or this is exactly what needs to happen anyway. Like there is this piece that's really like faded or faithful with this aspect because Neptune's also turning direct today.
Mhm. Yeah. So this will be I know that people had asked December 7th is what day of the week?
Saturday.
Saturday. Yeah. So this will be on Saturday when Neptune turns direct. So this ends its like 6 month cycle. We went retrograde in July of this past year. So that kind of retrograde cycle is done. Our review period is over. So we will be hanging out in the last couple degrees, Pisces, and then kind of riding that out until we switch into Neptune and Aries. Is there anything notable you want to say about Neptune going direct?
I just think that's what I was kind of feeling is like, even with Venus entering into Aquarius, Venus conjuncting Pluto, Venus having these tougher spots, like, and then the Mars retrograde, like these tough, we have had a lot of really challenging aspects these 2 days. And then the sun goes opposite Jupiter later on Saturday, and then Neptune turns direct. And the sun, even the sun in Sagittarius, is a very much like faith-filled energy or like trusting the universe kind of energy. And Neptune turning direct, Neptune literally like representing spirituality in the universe and oneness. There is that element, I think, of having more faith, having that ability to just be like, I can trust this all work out, even though nothing logically makes sense or nothing is clearly in the right ways. And I feel tension from all sides, but I just have to let this flow or like trust this process.
Yeah, that's a good point. So like Neptune retrograde could have had us like going back and forth between our beliefs and like maybe having a review of some like our spiritual practice or the way in which we like surrender in some way. So it moving retrograde, like you said, could like plug back in that like faith component if we feel like we've been missing that in one way or another. And I think it happens at a great time in Sagittarius season because like you mentioned, Sagittarius is also like super faith-based.
Yeah, and I just feel like, and it may too be even like the negative side of that is if you don't have strong faith and if you are a more logical, rational person who really wants to see things, you could like kind of have that mental spiral go on. Um, and you just have to like ground yourself in like, okay, what's true for me, and like what's true for me outside of the universe and the oneness and like everything in my world is falling apart, but like how can I take care of myself? That would
Mm,
be a very sun opposite Jupiter kind of thing.
yeah, it would. Yeah, it would. Well, too, I feel like the sun in Sagittarius is more like it's not selfish, but it is more kind of like connected to what are my dreams and my goals and my ambitions and kind of like um shadowing out like things that don't align with that. It's because you're so like future focused, so it can kind of be like more like tapped into the self in some way that's like connected to your future self, I guess I want to say. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. It's just like this, like, I need to be present and just be here. And then, like, what is true for me, like, I just been noticing, like, earlier this week that it's easy for me to get caught again scrolling and then getting so involved with what all the crap that's happening in our world. Just like, and it's all astrologically aligned. Like, we've been talking about challenging things for a long time, but like, what again, like, what's directly impacting you? What can you control? What can you do? What do you need to do? Like, do you need to do anything about all of this? Or maybe just put the phone down and like take a moment to just be like here with yourself. And that can be that Neptune component of like maybe just cutting yourself out from the world and being more direct about your own needs and beliefs and such.
Yeah, that's an interesting way to look at it also. Yeah. Yeah, because Neptune can be like you mentioned, like present moment awareness. So we could have like find some reprieve from everything with some of that.
Right.
Yeah.
So this wraps up the weekend, Friday, and this is Friday and Saturday. Really kind of intense 2 days. I'm glad we got to cover it on the podcast. And the thing we want to announce and mention is that we have our 6-month program starting in January, on January 19th. And this is the whole Learn Astrology with Us program. So it's live, it's not recorded, it's not something you kind of do. It is a live, like online with me and Kaleigh, learning everything that we know about astrology. We take you through the very basics, the very beginnings of things, especially Hellenistic astrology, because I feel like there's not a whole lot of really strong Hellenistic background. So it's a lot of that. First 3 months is all about interpreting charts. So you'll learn how to interpret birth charts, your own chart, things of that nature. Then the latter 3 months, we do move into predictive. And I'll start teaching more of how we do transit readings and predictive readings and all the techniques that we use. And Kaleigh also, alongside of this, has the art therapy and therapeutic component with astrology, which is what we use astrology for. So if you want to talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, of course. So I think like one of the biggest benefits I've gotten from astrology is like the ability to self-reflect. So with me, we'll be moving like through a lot of those self-reflection tools of how we can understand ourselves on a deeper level. So as you're going through the stuff with Maddie and learning all the tools and techniques, with me, we're going through what does this look like in my own chart? How can I kind of unpack all of this and understand my life story a little bit more and where I'm headed and, just understanding yourself on like a deeper psychological level. Because there's so many patterns in astrology too. Like there's so many behavioral patterns and things like that. There's just like a wonderful intersection between astrology and psychology that I think we would be like remiss not to tend to in some way. So I think it's really good as like if you work with clients one-on-one directly, is like this is something that you can start to offer your clients as like a tool for their self-reflection too. So yeah, the program is super comprehensive and we go into a lot, and I think it'll be a really transformative program for anybody who chooses to join.
Yes, so we are looking for a smaller group, capping in around 10 people. It's a small kind of class study, but this will be a good place for you to be hang out with us, but also hang out with other aspiring astrologers and learn astrology. And I'm really excited about teaching astrology. So definitely, if you want to learn more, I'll have the links and everything you need in the show notes or in the podcast description. So you just check that out. And if you want more from us or more content or more information about this program, we have information also on our social pages. So Instagram and TikTok at Two Girls Talk Transits. You'll see all the more breakdown, written out explanations of that as well.
Yep.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for this little add-on. And we'll see you back on schedule next week.
See
This
you.
week. Bye.
Bye.